The zoo industry has been around for a very long time. The first modern zoo arose in the 18th century in 1793 during the Age of Enlightenment, a period in European history when science, reason, and logic were seen as ideals of society and government, extending its focus to zoology. Animals were being studied by people for scientific reasons for their behavior and anatomy. In order for scientists to study animals, they had to keep them in places that resembled their natural habitats. The first modern zoo, built in 1793 Paris, France, was more of a museum with living animals than natural habitats. Animals were held in small display areas with as many species as possible. Nowadays, zoos are to educate and entertain the public while painting a strong hold on scientific research and conservation, also being regulated and inspected by the government. Zoos have always been under controversy regarding the idea of displaying animals behind an exhibition for the entertainment of the people. And while many of the older factors have dissolved and are no longer used, some still partake in inhumane practices or do not know how to operate a functional zoo for the health and safety of the animals. It is argued whether zoos educate the public about animals and provide their knowledge and insight into making people want to care about the well-being of it all, or that zoos don't educate the public enough and that they are simply for entertainment purposes behind a cage. The zoo industry has a long-running history of abuse and lack of training in regards of the animals' care, with the Calgary Zoo being the worst, holding a full list of deaths and injuries, the Surabaya Zoo, holding the name Zoo of Death, and the LA Zoo having a long history with animals escaping or oddly dying. The Calgary Zoo, located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, has a long-running history of incidents involving a variety of different species. The park opened on St. George's Island in 1917, originally used for picnics and socializing with animals. The park was established as a zoo in January of 1929, but during that year, many animals died during a swamp. Then again, much later, in 2013, the zoo experienced more flooding, resulting in $50 million in damages. Many animals were moved to a higher ground, but some died, like many fish, 2 peacocks, and a pig. A lot of incidents in the zoo were criticized for their conduct and operations. Going back to November of 2008, a 15-month Asian elephant calf was killed by a virus. The calf had been showing symptoms of an elephant herpes virus leading to internal bleeding and heart failure. It was believed by staff that the calf contracted the disease from an adult elephant who can carry the disease without showing symptoms or being sick.
We recognise that whilst we've had great success here with elephants, there are more than a dozen elephants across the planet that are descendant from the success we have had here at Calgary Zoo. But our success shouldn't just be measured by how effective we are at captive breeding, but also how effective we are at maintaining exceptional standards of welfare.
Some months later in May, 41 stingrays in a 37,000-litre tank of 43 stingrays died due to lack of dissolved oxygen. The zoo claimed it was a human error on their part and that they didn't have the expertise to manage the stingrays. 1 year later in 2009, 2 more stingrays died after arriving at the zoo, but the zoo blamed it on a shipping problem. The zoo no longer houses stingrays. The beginning of the year 2009 only provided a glimpse into the horrors that would play out the rest of the year. In January, a Turkmenian markhor, or a wild goat, died after hanging itself. The goat had tangled itself in a rope toy while in its enclosure that was suspended above ground. The markhor slipped off a log lamp and broke its neck. All that was said by the zoo's director of conservation, Kathy Gabler, was that the incident was a very unfortunate accident. 5 months later, in June of that year, zoo patrons saw Barika, a western lowland gorilla, holding a knife and pointing it at another gorilla in the enclosure. The knife belonged to a zookeeper who had left it behind in the exhibit. Also that year, an employee was suspended after an 18-month-old female capybara died less than 6 months after it had arrived at the facility. Officials claimed the animal was killed from being crushed by a hydraulic door. In 2010, a tiger cub died after its birth, struggling to survive for 2 days after being born. It is believed the animal succumbed to complications from severe head trauma, much like its sibling who died shortly after birth. Another year later, in October of 2011, a zookeeper carelessly left a corn snake unattended near a heat source, leading to the snake's death. Following its death, the zookeeper resigned. The year 2014 had many deaths. In September, there was an issue with an ozone sensor in the hippo pool, which caused the deaths of 85 tilapia. 2 months later, in November, a 5-month-old woodland caribou calf died due to complications relating to severe neck trauma. No further explanations were given on what the neck trauma could have been. In 2016, a 12-year-old river otter passed away in his pool. The zoo claimed the otter was seen struggling by a zookeeper who jumped into the pool to save the animal, but it was too late. The otter had died after becoming tangled in a pair of pants given to the otter by a zookeeper. The zookeeper said they put the pants in the dry burrow area, where the otter then took the pants into the water and drowned after becoming trapped. Nearing the end of 2016 in December, 7 penguins died at the facility, believing to have drowned in a state of panic. The Humboldt penguins have been moved to another holding area due to renovations in their regional habitat. Zookeepers found 1 penguin floating lifelessly in the pool, and when the pool was drained, another 6 penguins were found dead at the bottom. Reports showed they had all drowned, and it is suspected they were in distress and panicked while in the water.
We'll do as much investigation for events leading up to as well as what's going on now, and then the further necropsy results and see. But at this stage, it just seems like it was a strange one-off behavioral thing with this group of penguins.
More recently, in May in 2023, a female Maasai giraffe died by breaking her neck. The 12-year-old giraffe was found leaning against a fence in the African savanna yard. The zoo claimed one of the ossicones, or horns, got caught on a cable in the enclosure, which led to her falling and breaking her neck. This year, in July of 2024, a polar bear died by drowning. According to the zoo, a 7-year-old polar bear died by drowning after taking an injury by another polar bear. The 2 bears were said to be rough playing. Both bears were in good physical health with no evidence of distress.
Baffin and the 7-year-old male Siku were sparring in the lower pool. This is something that's considered healthy, natural, normal behavior. After a few minutes, though, of sparring, a volunteer noticed that Baffin had not resurfaced. The exhibit was closed to visitors. The surviving bear was moved out of the pool, and Baffin was confirmed at that point to have died. The bear will undergo an extensive necropsy to try and determine what happened.
While the incident was not the zoo's own mistakes, it was another death that the Calgary Zoo had taken. The Surabaya Zoo, located in Indonesia, is known for its large collection of animals, but more importantly, large number of controversies regarding animal welfare. Established in August of 1916, the zoo stretches 37 acres of land with 3,500 animals and almost 200 different species. It was once one of Southeast Asia's largest zoos, with rare species including Sumatran tigers, orangutans, and Komodo dragons. However, the zoo is famously known as the Zoo of Death due to many reports involving poor living conditions, malnutrition, neglect, and high mortality rate among the animals. In 2010, the Forestry Ministry revoked the zoo's license following several animals' deaths, including a Sumatran tiger, African lion, wallaby, Komodo dragon, babirusa, Bawean deer, and crocodile. An investigation by the police in East Java Natural Resources Conservation Agency was sent to investigate the deaths and found negligent zookeepers were to blame for the deaths. 387 animals were transferred to conservation organizations, and it was found several were in bad condition, eventually dying. Autopsies found some animals had plastic and wood inside of them. A Malani tiger was found suffering from extreme digestive disorders before being rescued. In March of 2012, a giraffe passed away in its enclosure. The PR team at the zoo said it was very old. The medical team tried, but it still died. After being treated at an animal hospital for being found weak and unconscious, the medical team put an IV and iron brace on the giraffe to help the animal stand. However, an examination found that the animal had several pieces of plastic in its body, probably due to eating the wrong food. In January of 2014, it was revealed by the director of the Regional Animal Park Company that 84 collections in the zoo were old and sick, with 44 of these animals being under supervision. There have been several petitions to shut down the zoo due to its poor allegations of corruption, neglect, and breeding. However, the zoo remains open to this day. The Los Angeles Zoo, or known as the LA Zoo, was founded in November of 1966, formerly known as the Griffith Park Zoo, though remnants of that park still remain inside of the zoo. The zoo is known for their diverse collection of animals and strong focus on conservation and education. While the zoo mostly portrays a family-friendly atmosphere, they have occasionally faced criticism from animal rights groups over animal welfare concerns. In the 90s, the zoo was in trouble as exhibits were cramped and filthy, and the zoo appeared as if they were losing accreditation. In January of 1992, a water pipe burst and half the zoo didn't have water. Officials passed a $300 million master plan to aid in the construction of new architecture and exhibits. That accreditation was almost lost in 1995 from health and safety violations until a new director filled its place. As of now, the zoo has many exhibits for all kinds of their 270 species, with 1,400 animals and 133 acres of land. In June of 2012, a chimpanzee infant was born to a 15-member chimp tribe. However, the infant was mauled to death by an adult male chimpanzee. The zoo claimed the incident was totally unexpected, but it was always a possibility. In the end, the zoo offered counseling services to staff and visitors, and claimed they would be looking over their policy regarding infant introductions. From the 90s to the early 2000s, many animals have escaped from the LA Zoo, such as zebras, chimps, kangaroos, and antelopes. The LA Times reported at least 35 animals have escaped from the zoo. More infamously, a gorilla named Evelyn had escaped about 4 to 5 times from her enclosure. The gorilla jumped onto another gorilla's back to get over the wall. Other times, she would use vines to pull herself out and over the exhibit. She was only out of her enclosure for about an hour while helicopters swarmed overhead and visitors were evacuated from the zoo. Back in 1979, a wolf named Virginia escaped the zoo multiple times by climbing trees and fences, walking amongst branches to escape the zoo. Zoo officials and veterinarians tried to subdue the wolf with tranq guns, but it did not help, and it is unknown whether the wolf was ever recaptured. In 2014, a bighorn sheep escaped the LA Zoo, dashing around the park for hours before the animal entered a residential area. While roaming free, the sheep was struck by a car and died. The zoo claimed the sheep probably freed itself from its enclosure by jumping a fence. The animal was only loose for about 3 hours until it died. In 2016, a mountain lion living in the urban mountains of LA climbed a 9-foot fence of the zoo and mauled an 18-pound koala in the middle of the night. According to the zoo, one of their 11 koalas liked to leave her tree at night to roam the pen, which is how it is believed the mountain lion was able to get to the 14-year-old koala. The zoo was surprised the mountain lion was able to come into the zoo as they have security monitoring the site at night.
The zoo is revealing that last week one of its koalas disappeared from its habitat.
About probably 40 yards from that space, though, the staff found a puff of fur, no blood.
A few minutes later, the rest of the koala was found mauled. Zoo security figured a bobcat or coyote got in, but what they found on the surveillance video surprised them: a mountain lion.
The zoo industry will always have its controversies. There are always going to be people and activists who claim zoos do no good for animals or their species, that people are better off supporting conservations and sanctuaries as they are more invested in the animals rather than the public. The Calgary Zoo claims to make change after change regarding the animals' welfare, but more incidents keep taking place, even this year. Calls to shut down the Surabaya Zoo are still present, so it makes no sense why it is still open unless it is all for profit. The LA Zoo, while doing well, has a long-running history of animals escaping, but has not seen an incident since 2016. The debate between zoos, sanctuaries, and conservations is bound to continue, with many questioning if zoos will ever truly balance their profits with the ethical treatment of the animals in their care.